On July 4th, 1956, in Massapequa, Long Island, several kids were playing war in the woods, saying they dreamed of becoming soldiers someday, just like the veterans in the parade later that day, whom they look up to and considered heroes. One of the kids is Ron Kovich, who immediately goes to the parade afterward. Ron also celebrates his 10th birthday, and the eldest among the siblings and his dad's favorite. As they watch, Ron admires the veterans in their uniforms, even though some are in wheelchairs or have lost limbs in a fight. Ron has a lot of friends in his small town, one of whom is a girl named Donna who has a crush on him. Ron is also competitive, which is why he wants to succeed at all costs in whatever he does, including winning his school its first ever baseball championship. Ron carries this mentality as he grows, and when he enters high school, he joins their wrestling team to challenge his physical limits, determined to prove to everyone that he is the best. But on the day of the championship, when Ron fights for the title, he loses in front of his family and friends, which frustrates him the most. One day, several Marine Corps officers arrive at their school to recruit students. Ron, who has dreamed of being in the military since he was a kid, is determined to join no matter what it takes. He even convinces some of his friends to join as well, except for one named Stevie. Later that night, as he and his father Eli talk, Eli tries to persuade Ron not to join the Marines, but Ron is determined and receives support from his mother Patty. Ron also points out that it has been his dream since he was a kid, and he is willing to sacrifice his life for his country. Years later, in 1967, Ron is now a Marine sergeant on his second tour in Vietnam, leading a team of mostly new recruits. They are on a mission to take over a village reported to be an enemy hideout. However, an accidental weapon discharge occurs, resulting in open fire on the village before the command is given. Ron and his team are tasked with checking the casualties. But as they check inside some of the huts, Ron discovers that they have opened fire on a civilian-occupied village composed of women and children who were killed immediately. Ron and his team, shocked by this, try to help the survivors, but they receive an order to evacuate immediately as artillery is inbound to target the rushing enemy at the site. Ron and his team run back to the rest, but after spotting the enemies closing in, Ron stops to fight them to protect his team. Suddenly, he hears a scream rushing towards him and shoots at it. When the man falls to the ground, he realizes it is one of his team named Wilson. Later that night, Ron reports to his commander to admit that he accidentally killed Wilson and is willing to accept the consequences of his actions, but his commander tries to protect him and orders him never to mention it again. Several months later, Ron and his team are on their way to another village when, all of a sudden, the enemy opens fire on them, hitting some of his men. Ron orders his team to hold their ground, but most of them fall back. Ron is hit in the Achilles, but stands his ground and continues firing at the enemy. Soon after, he is shot in the chest and collapses to the ground. One of his men runs toward him and carries him back to a safer position. Ron manages to survive and is immediately taken back to their headquarters, but he learns that the one who rescued him died from a gunshot while saving him. Several months later, Ron is back in the U.S. and confined to a veterans hospital that is underfunded and understaffed. He has been in a wheelchair for months and learns from the doctors that he is paralyzed from the mid-chest down and will never walk again. However, Ron insists that he will walk again, and with the help of the hospital staff, he pushes himself through intensive training to prove that he can. But after some time, when he tries to walk on his own with braces and crutches, he falls to the ground and re-injures his legs. Several months later, Ron becomes frustrated while lying in his hospital bed and confronts some of the staff, demanding to see a doctor. His doctor arrives and explains in a very calm manner that the government has reduced its budget for veterans like him. That night, Ron accepts his fate, that he will never walk again, and after a few weeks, he returns home and is welcomed by his family, friends, and neighbors. Ron fakes a smile and gives a vague answer when they ask if he is fine, because deep inside he hates being in that condition. The next day, Ron visits Stevie, who is now a manager at a fast food restaurant, and tries to convince him to work as a cashier there. Ron declines, frustrating Stevie, and points out that he went to war without even knowing if the cause was just, and insists that the soldiers fighting there are engaged in a pointless war. A few days later, Ron attends an Independence Day, his homecoming parade, and rides in a convertible, but he learns that several people are not fans of the war, believing it only ruins men's lives. Later, as he listens to the speaker, he learns that most of his friends died in Vietnam, which makes him emotional as he realizes he has no friends left. When Ron is called to make a speech, he gets distracted by the sounds around him, which remind him of his time in Vietnam and prompt him to immediately leave the place. As he and his family are about to leave, one of his friends, Timmy, shows up and they immediately leave the place. That night, as Ron and Timmy talk about most of their friends dying horrifically in the war, Ron confesses that he accidentally shot and killed Wilson and feels deep remorse for volunteering for the war. Timmy agrees, admitting that he also realizes what they did there doesn't make sense. He confesses that he unknowingly killed several civilians during his tour as well. Several months later, Ron visits Donna in New York. Although Donna seems happy to see him, Ron senses that she may not want him in her life. As they talk, Donna reveals that she has joined an activist group against the war in Vietnam and asks Ron to join as well, believing he could help prove that the war is senseless on all sides. The next day, Ron joins protesters for the victims of a shooting at a state college with Donna. However, the police arrive to arrest everyone involved, and Donna is arrested along with the others, while Ron can't do anything to help her. Ron returns home and, while at a bar with Timmy, he gets drunk and gets into an argument with another veteran. However, the veteran does not hit him out of pity, because Ron is in a wheelchair. Later, Ron approaches a woman named Jenny and asks her to dance. But as they dance, Ron falls to the floor and is unable to get up on his own, and Jenny leaves. Timmy helps him into his wheelchair and drops him home, but as soon as he arrives, Ron gets into another argument, this time with his father and mother, who are trying to convince him to stop getting drunk every night, warning that they will be forced to send him to a veteran hospital for paraplegics in Mexico. Ron, drunk and emotional, rants about the war and all the wrongdoings they committed during it. He insists they were forced to do those things, which ultimately led to him being paralyzed. Now, he believes he has become useless. All for nothing. Later, his father helps him to bed and insists that Ron should leave for a while, so Ron decides to go to the paraplegic hospital in Mexico. When Ron arrives, he meets some paralyzed veterans, including one named Charlie, who takes him to various bars around town. This isn't good for Ron, as he's there to be treated, not to get worse. One morning, Charlie gets into trouble with a woman, and when Ron tries to help, they both get thrown out of the bar. They ride a cab back to the hospital, but along the way, Charlie accuses the driver of rigging the meter. In response, the driver drops them off in the middle of nowhere. Frustrated, and facing the possibility of spending the night in the desert, Charlie turns his anger on Ron, and the two end up fighting, falling out of their wheelchairs and rolling around in the nearby sand. Fortunately, a man driving a truck passes by and offers to help. Ron continues to live in the hospital but keeps getting drunk and worsening. Every night he is haunted by the traumatic accident in which he shot and killed Wilson. Feeling guilty, he decides to meet with Wilson's family. Several days later, Ron visits Wilson's grave in his hometown and then goes to see his family. There, Ron confesses to Wilson's father, mother, and wife that he was the one who accidentally killed Wilson that day. However, after hearing this, Wilson's mother assures him that they understand what he is going through. Several months later, Ron joins a protest against the war and arrives at President Nixon's nomination acceptance speech. A number of reporters notice him and ask for an interview, and Ron shares that he despises the war and feels betrayed by the government for sending them to fight in a conflict where, in his view, they had no right to intervene. However, the interview is cut short when security moves in to remove them from the area. The police arrest Ron and drag him out of his wheelchair to put him in the back of the police car, but several other protesters come to his rescue and carry him away. A few blocks away, everyone gathers and Ron orders them to return to the hall to continue their protest. They return with Ron leading the way, but the police are also there to stop them at all costs. 4 years later, Ron is invited to give a speech in front of thousands of people at Madison Square Garden. Just before he takes the stage, his life flashes before his eyes, bringing a smile to his face for the first time in a long while. When asked why, Ron admits that he feels like he is finally back home. Ron Kovic continues to join anti-war campaigns across the country and around the world, and traveling to these war-torn regions to offer support to those affected. Feel free to leave a comment below and share any details we might have missed. If you enjoyed our recap, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more. Thank you for watching.